Greetings and welcome to the Destination Goa Trance podcast, bringing in-depth interviews with artists, label people, organizers from the golden age of the 90s to the modern era. My name is Simon and I'm here with the one and only Thibaut.
Nice, let's talk about Goa Trance. We are in the middle of the festival season. I hope everybody is enjoying the summer. We are continuing with the second episode of our interview with Suntrip, now concentrating more on the festivals they organize.
You talked about having close relationship with the artists, working closely together with them when it comes to like an artist album release. How much freedom the artists usually have in terms of like selecting the artwork or coming up with the final like track list of the album, or how much control you like to have over?
Regarding artwork, we're actually extremely flexible in the sense that for an artist album, the artist will give us an idea what he wants, and if he has an artist, then we manage to convince this guy to work for a very small fee, because that's basically all we have for artwork. Then we will work with him. Otherwise, we will ask him the concept and make Rodolfo make an artwork for him. But it's the artist who will decide on the artwork if he likes it or not. So sometimes we end up with something that we think, might not be entirely our style, but we want to give the artist the freedom to decide that. While on a compilation, we work out an idea, mainly Jos, and then works with Rodolfo to create it. Like, for example, the finals we do now with the classic best of Suntrip, where it's always Simeon, a photographer, delivering amazing pictures, which then get manipulated into fantastic artwork by Rodolfo by working together with Simeon. That's a real concept that we then run because it's a compilation. The input comes from us. Well, on an artist album, it comes from the artist, as I explained. And in music, basically, the artist is always free because he sends us the music. Of course, if me and Joss don't like it, there is no point for us to release it. So you have two types, like you said. There's different with artists. You have artists who send you something and it will really always be like, oh yes, please, we want to release this because it's fantastic. And you have other artists who send something and you're like, it's very good, but it needs a bit more work here and there. And if they're up for it, they change it. And if they are not up for it, they refuse to change it. But that depends on the artist then once again. And sometimes he works very hard on a track, and then in the end it becomes like a track that we believe in. We release it. Sometimes it's like, nope, sorry. That's the harder part of being a label then, because you really need to say that, sorry, we won't release it. It's not good enough in our opinion, or not unique enough. So it depends very much on the artist, but we never dictate the music or the artwork. If the artist does create something we love, we release it. If not, we see if it can be changed, or if we believe in the main idea of the track, and we give productive comments.
Yes. Although I have to say it works in both ways. I mean, I also, once in the past, we promised an album to an artist, and in the end, we were not really happy with the results. So that's also, let's say, a mistake we shouldn't make anymore. I mean, artists are totally free. They can release with other labels. I don't care. I don't care. I mean, sometimes it's a bit painful to see certain artists go away, but I will never refuse them to let them release with someone else, because if this is the way, I don't want to, let's say, close up artists. I think it's important they have their artistic freedom. It's, for me, the main thing in art. You need freedom, because the best music is created when they're totally free. So this is also the reason sometimes I ask an artist, you have a new album ready, let's listen, and if it's good enough, I will release it. But I will never say anymore, the next album you make, we will release it for sure. Because, sometimes the result is not as hoped. So let's say at least we need half of the album to be heard already before we can even make a decision, let's continue or not. So,
There was this 604 bookings run by Chris for a couple of years. What happened to that? Is this still running?
This is a very small sidekick of Suntrip, which is basically me facilitating an artist who don't like to be in contact with organizers who have something like, I want some guy involved who I trust. because that's basically how it's grown. It grown out of parties, giving parties. Those artists saw we did something good, I believe, because they all told us you usually, and that's how we managed to grow our parties, that our parties were very well organized. It started with some organizers asking me, hey, can you help me book this guy? Or some artists asking me, hey, this organizer asks me, but I have no idea at all if I should trust him or not, because basically now less than before, but there have been some times when we had very amateurish organizations in the Goa trance scene, as it is mostly done from love by the heart, because there's not much money going around in this scene. You have to be motivated from the music. And then there are always people who, of course, don't care how their parties look or how the artists get treated. So usually in Belgium, I am many times connected to both all the organizers here and many artists. So that's how I was asked to run 604 bookings for Suntrip. It's not a real booking agency like FM Bookings, for example. It's usually more a freelance job where somebody shows up, wants to use my artist connections, because we do organize parties for so long and we are connected to most of them through Suntrip or through older parties we did with the old school crowd. And like this has grown naturally, but it's absolutely something I maybe spent like 2 days on in a whole year. And it's more like a small help to the scene because the artist or the organizer requests me to be in between. However, I find it important that we do it because it really helps festival organizers to quickly connect with us and us to give them feedback on new releases we do. On the other hand, it also gives the artists someone they trust to be in between them and the organizer, and they know I will apply my own standards of parties for them. So it often helps a lot, and then it helps us too, because of course, as we are very well connected with them, we manage to build up Sarah with a massive lineup because we know who to book and who's available, and if we don't know, then one of our friends will probably know. So like this, we often can get people back who we would never imagine to play again, like for example Shady, where we had been requesting her for 15 years probably, and it came to the point where we gave up. Until then suddenly she popped up and of course played on Apsara, which was one of the legendary moments on the festival, and for me as a festival organizer in my whole career, as I was dreaming for this from when I was started to organize parties in 2006-7.
As you mentioned, the beginnings of your organizer career and how the scene was back then and how it is nowadays, what things have been achieved, parties made on artist book that you couldn't imagine. What is the key to the success of Suntrip? Was there always like a steady Goa trance fan base in Belgium? Because Belgium is known for the Goa trance scene now, but was it always there? You just had to be grown, or?
It went in waves, honestly, in my opinion, because it's something you as an organizer have to adapt for. For example, in 2002, 3, 4, we had a very active scene, really active scene in Belgium with parties every week, 2, 3 parties, sometimes too much even, honestly. And that continued then with very less Goa parties, but all the new music. Then in 2004, finally, there was a huge party again, the Rise of the Phoenix one. And then it had to be built again because it was a one-time shot and smaller parties occurred again, 200 people, 150 people. But that's very difficult. And then it became huge until 2013, 14, where the biggest of our parties attended 1,500 people. And then all of a sudden, parties became smaller again in Belgium, and we started again give 250, 350 people parties. At a certain point, the parties were very interesting, and then suddenly it dropped to 750, 600, 500, 300. So it's really a wave. And now we are back up a bit that the bigger parties go back to 4, 5, 600 people. So in Belgium, it's absolutely over 20 years and more going in waves. But on the other hand, internationally, I think it's more successful than ever before because it collapsed after the 90s. And if you see now that Belgium, Israel, Portugal, Serbia, Hungary, absolutely also, and how many festivals also boom, at least have very important days where they play a full day of Goa Trance or 2 days of Goa Trance. How many festivals there are, ZNA, that magical festival where there's already 5,000 people on the lake, which is just like, the dream spot for a Goa Trance festival. Could not imagine years ago. Apsara, you have then Ozora with a fantastic lineup on the first 24 hours. You have Boom doing always something like that on Saturday and Sunday. And then you have countless parties in those countries and in smaller countries like Macedonia, also a very active scene. And Jos will probably be able to add a lot more countries as his experience as a DJ. But so it's not always the same in your local scene as it is in the international scene.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, Chris, because you were talking about the parties as a measurement of a success. But it's interesting because if you look to the sales, for instance, Belgium is only 15% of the sales. So number one in the world is Germany, which is a country where there's no parties when it comes to Goa Trance. So clearly there must be a lot of hippies sitting at home and listening to the music, but they don't find a place to dance on it. It's interesting. And number two is France, also not the place for Goa Trance. And UK is number 3, which is the same. So somehow the countries you would expect to sell a lot don't sell that much. And I think it has to do with the roots of the scene. I mean, I guess in Germany, in France, and the UK, there's still a lot of guys from, let's say, 20 years ago that loved the music back then that found out about Suntrip and keep buying it. So I expect, I don't know for sure, but I expect a lot of the people are actually kind of old that buy our music. I'm not sure. I don't have numbers for it, but it looks like it. Also, because I think the people still buying CDs are generally older anyway. So that's it. On the other hand, how you measure success as a label? I think we were just lucky to be on the right moment, on the right place at the right time. That's one. And the second thing, we were always professional. If I hate one thing, as a DJ, I have seen stuff you cannot even imagine, and everybody knows the stories like, yeah, you can play on my party and you can sleep on my couch, and you have to be careful that you don't end up between needles and a dog shitting on you. I mean, I was in those situations myself, so the scene didn't always have a very professional output. But when it comes to labels, it's the same. So many labels were unprofessional, didn't pay their artists, made agreements, didn't keep them. And I think maybe because both Fabien in the beginning, me and Chris, we all have, let's say, a successful, normal life, working accountant, CEO, all this type of stuff. We are used to keeping our words. And it really, artists after a while realized, yeah, we can trust those guys. And I think that made our name much stronger. And that's the ripple from the stone throwing in the water, and slowly it goes around. And it takes a while. Yeah, the first 10 years nobody knows about you, but at a certain point it just exploded. It's not only in Goa Trance. You see it in let's say normal trance, you saw it in techno, you saw it in a lot of other scenes. That 90s music boomed again because the new music became inspirationless and boring. So I think we were just lucky that at that time, everybody knew, yeah, Goa Trance, it's Suntrip, right? And that's how it ended up now. And I don't think, honestly, we are that successful if you really look to the numbers, because it's, like we said, a lot of our releases don't even break even. And big names sell a few hundred CDs. It's nothing. I mean, it's almost a joke if you think about it. But yeah, it's the passion. Like Chris said, if you see on ZNA, 2,000, 3,000 people go crazy on your music as a label, yeah, it's the best feeling in the world. That's why you do it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked with Billy from Cosmosis, and he said that back in the day, in the 90s, Of course, we cannot compare nowadays to that, but they were selling EPs in quantities like 10 or 50,000.
Yes, and the fees that were paid, if you think about it today, it's insane. Back in the days, we're talking about payments of 20,000 euros and we're talking about 99. Compared to today's standards, it's easily 50, 60,000 euros for a release. And then we are here like, maybe you can do it for 60 euros. I mean, it's a disgrace if you think about it, but yeah.
I think Shakta told me once that he even got an advance on an album release. So because there was a contract that he would release an album on one of the old school labels back in the 90s, and he even got an advance payment so that he could buy equipment for his studio to finish the album.
No, absolutely not. It's everything is the gigs for the artists, but of course, to have gigs, you need to have releases as well. And I think one of the successes that helped Suntrip to go a long way was the fact, like Jos said, Fabien, Jos, and me from a party perspective in the beginning, but we all tried to do it in the professional way. That was one thing, and we didn't care about ourselves one bit regarding money, which was the passion speaking. Did that for 20 years easily. Slowly you build something that then becomes bigger than you can imagine, but that was by collaborating everything, having a low cost, nothing actually from our side, having no accountant, and then trying to bring that to the artist and investing in the artist and slowly building the festivals and the label together. And it was a cross-feeding. And I don't think that one can exist honestly today without the other very easily, because or the artist plays on our parties and we manage to get more music, or he releases to a Suntrip and then we manage to convince him to play again. So it sometimes depends where it starts, but it usually ends up the same way, where you have old artists that release suddenly on classic Goa tracks and then we can get them on gigs again. But you sometimes also have them only play and then you slowly get them to convince to make new Goa tracks, which is an interesting movement that is happening nowadays, because you see Xenomorph coming back, SETI project. We can say that Etnica is very actively working on new Goa trance, and many, many more old artists are interested in it again, like Gamma Draconis compilation from time to time. So it's not only you had a time where there were only the new school artists and all the old were into the progressive and the full-on, but slowly that is all coming together, which is, in my opinion, a sign of a very healthy scene, because that's basically how we always wanted it. The old guys really coming back with passion for the music as well.
Yeah, and also there is the Prana album released this year. Also there are other labels, not just Suntrip, of course, out there now promoting the Goa trance sound. So it's also, I think, a sign of a healthy scene.
True, although I would love to see more labels active, to be honest. I think it's not enough yet. The more labels, I mean, there's often we have to disappoint artists not releasing their music, and then I see their album is never released, which is kind of sad, I think. But, and yeah, you have Global Sect. I think it's the other label that is really, let's say, concentrating on the new modern Goa trance wave. But all the rest are kind of small. Yeah, you have some labels like Konomi and Goa Madness, and there's some more. But if they release, like Zion, but if they release, it stays under the radar for some reason mostly, which is kind of a pity, because a lot of good music sees the light like that. And then you have a lot of digital releases, but maybe it's just me, but I miss out on them mostly. I don't know why. I still want my music physical, but I'm an old fart, so that's the reason, I guess.
I have a little bit of a nitpicky question. To me, a lot of the new artists that were coming out in the 2010s, they sounded a bit like a newer version of Pleiadians or Astral Projection. They kind of make music in the same atmosphere. If you listen to it a lot, you can differentiate them, but they are really sounding similar, while in the old school, you could hear that, hey, this is Green Nuns of Revolution, this is Etnica from the first listen. And do you agree with this? And why do you think that nowadays it is so rare to create the different types of Goa trance? Why aren't people experimenting more?
I agree to some extent. It's true that at a certain point there was not enough variety in the type of music that was released. It's not because we were not interested in releasing it, but basically the problem was the promos. They were sometimes very good, but it was indeed in a very typical, let's say, Etnica formula. I think last few years this changed a bit. If you look to our outputs, it's more all kind of stuff, which is a good thing. Although I got the criticism lately, hey, you're not releasing enough Goa trance anymore. So it's funny that, yeah, it all depends a bit on what you like, of course. But yeah, to this I agree. And why is that? I think two reasons. First of all, the laptop. Everybody can make music. That's basically it. I mean, everybody can make music. And while in the past, yeah, you had to invest, like Peter said about Shakhtar, for instance, you need to invest tens of thousands of euros in material to release something. While today, if you have a decent laptop, 1,000 euros, you can basically make everything you want, which is good because everybody gets a chance, but it's not good because a lot of rubbish is there and everybody's just copying, and you see a lot of YouTube channels that are saying how to make the music, which kills the creativity a bit, I think. And the second part, a lot of the modern musicians are not musically schooled anymore. While back in the days, if you mentioned, for instance, Green Nuns, all of them came from rock bands, which you can hear in their music. I think if you're trained in traditional classical musical way, it's more easy to step out of the, let's say, rules. And that's a bit the paradox of a music genre, I think. If you make the same, people are complaining it's the same, but if you make it different, people are complaining you're not part of the typical sound anymore. So this is an issue, but I agree. I would love to release more harmonics-like stuff, or I mean, people that know my DJ sets know I play a lot of weird music and I love it, but I never get those promos basically. And I would love, I mean, back in the days, like Pelimpala, he was a jazz artist. You can hear it in his music, and it could be interesting to have more artists that have a different background going into the trance scene because they would influence us in a different way. But yeah, you cannot push it. The artists just come by and show their stuff.
Maybe the problem is that these artists are already influenced by each other and by the other Goa trance artists.
It's partly true. The young guys that they grew up with, the Etnica Palladians, like you said, I mean, they were born the moment EFO was released. And yeah, they were 15 listening to that music and yeah, I want to make this too. And then you end up copying it to some extent, of course. I agree.
I think it also has to do with the fact that, first of all, back then the music was completely new. So obviously everything sounded a bit differently, while we are now 30 years into the genre. Two, it is as something you need to do from a passion. And as a young artist nowadays, you need to have a lot of patience in building your fan base and in starting to play at parties. And that's not, everyone wants instant success, but that's not what's going to happen in a scene like the Goa trance scene. And then you need a lot of conviction because young artists need to make one album, and if it's good enough, we will release it. But then the second and the third, they need to grow into their style. That's usually for me when I can see an artist starting to evaluate and change, and where you see like the third Triquetra album compared to their first, this is a massive step. This is essentially how also Filteria went from Sky Input to his last one, which rocked each and every dance floor on each of every Psytrance festival worldwide, because it also evolved to something completely different. You have Celestial taking that big step with the second album, and hopefully doing that again with the third album. You have Ephedra who built his style in Goa Madness over the years, and then they get to a unique style, which you can say, that's Ephedra, that's Celestial Intelligence. And that's difficult to do, but in the 90s, basically, there's also not so many artists who could make 5 Genius albums. So it's not something easy to do in a small scene. And nowadays, everyone can do it. The first one, yes, but then try to distanciate yourself from the herd with a second and a third album. And or you fade away, or you become more successful, you play more, and you get more creative in what you do.
Yeah, and also I think today it's easier to copy other artists, at least on a technical level, because there are like dozens of tutorials on YouTube on how to make psytrance music, like in general terms, what techniques to be used. And if you are dedicated to the craft and you really want to like sculpt sounds on a computer, you have all the tools. It's easy to follow a tutorial and you can do it. But the musical element, the vision, I think that's from the few interviews we've already done, it's pretty clear that artists usually in the 90s had at least some kind of a vision for what they want to communicate, what this track that they are trying to put together, what it should be about, what kind of feelings they want to put in. And they had different equipment, of course, different studio setups, and it was harder to copy the same sound because the elements, the main elements like the synthesizers were different. Or even if they were the same, the setup, the physical setup was a bit different, and that was enough on its own to make a different sound. The way they used the equipment was different.
It's true. And also you had often several artists in a room, which also, the more creative brains you have in one place, the more interesting the music could become, I think. I'm sure it had an influence too.
Let's talk a little bit about this year releases. And as the managers of Suntrip, tell us, why should they buy and listen to Mini Spacer album, to the Xenomorph album, and the latest one, the SETI project? Let's say for an album you have one sentence. Convince the people.
I will try. Yes.
Chris, you can do that one.
SETI project, because the guy might not be extremely famous, but he makes really fantastic acid Goa trance. Something rarely made nowadays, and he does it in the most fantastic way. He worked extremely hard on that album, and you can hear that. Xenomorph, comeback of an artist in his evolved Goa trance style, different from his dark, unique. And then Mini Spacer, a huge new talent from Belgium with his own style, different, floating, yet coming in the end to a lot of spirals. Honestly, a great new, promising artist.
I completely agree with Mini Spacer. It's just a refreshing album to me.
Yeah, and also his live performance at Apsara and the Surya Spirit, it was great. So yeah, he's really
But for
promising.
me, honestly, an artist where when I listened to it at home, it didn't work. And when I listened to it at the dance floor, it was like, yes, I understand why Jos told me we need to release this. You really need to experience his sets a bit for me to personally get it suck into his story completely. And it's totally different than anything else yet again, and very special. I'm sure he's gonna grow further, and he has a lot of passion. That's what we are looking for, new talents.
What are your plans for the label this year and onwards?
Too many. Because I was a lot in hospital, I had a lot of time to work on new releases. So this is kind of interesting. We're now June, so in the summer we always take a break because, people are traveling around, going from festival to festival. But after the summer, the first release will be a Mindsphere, and a bit different from his latest albums. It will be a triple CD album with one CD that is like, let's say, a regular Mindsphere album. One CD with only live cuts. As most of you know, he's quite famous for his live performances on YouTube. Well, I wanted to release some of them because I had them, and they're often 20 minutes because they're really played live. He adds every 16 note and extra thing and all this. And well, let's say, going back to the roots where music was really created live on the spots, and I wanted to give it a chance. So the second CD will only be live cuts like that. And the third CD will be a pure ambient CD because he really loves this style too. After that, we have a Battle of Future Buddhas, which will be a 2 CD. One, let's say dark and light, but we chose not to call it dark because people might think it's dark trance. It's not. It's a bit more, let's say, twilight music and daytime music. That's the way David described it. Yeah, I heard the music. Let's say the daytime is more or less what you could expect from the last album he released with us, which was, if you talk about sales, so one of the big surprises and did very well. And let's say Twilight's CD will be a bit more Twin Shark things like. It won't be minimal or anything, but with lots of melodies, but well, with a dark twist. We have for sure around Christmas 30 years Ethnica release, which will also be a 3 CD. You have the remasters, you have the unreleased, and the third CD will be a remaster of Alien Protein, because it was also never remastered, and we have all the original ones from that now, so we can do a proper remaster, and we think it deserves it big time. And also to celebrate the 30 years Ethnica. And like this, it's also a way of, let's say, all the fans, because you were saying everybody sounds like Ethnica. It has a reason, because it's the best music in the world out there. And like this, basically all the music that was ever released has been remastered by us or by that records. And the unreleased, let's say, all the good music will be out there by then. And I'm working on a compilation too. And when it's released, it depends a bit, because artists, they are creative people and you never know when they're finished. I don't want to push them like that date, it should be ready. If they're not ready, they're not ready. And we can put the compilation in between. And that's not even all, because we have some vinyl releases coming up. We have another Suntrip Classics Volume 3 coming up. We will have a reprint of Asia 2001 Psychedelia on vinyl. It was never released on a vinyl, so for sure, for the freaks, it's nice. And we have 3 EPs coming up on Classic Goa tracks. One of them will be a Bypass Unit EP with tracks that were never released on vinyl before, like Nanosphere Courier. The second one will be a Gangnia release, which is the other name of Exploring Inner Space, which is pure acid trance. And the third one will be a Sinsun EP, who made fantastic music at the late 90s, early 2000s. And somehow he never got the attention he deserved. And yeah, we want to help him a bit with a vinyl release. So that's all planned until, New Year. But as you can see, it's a lot. But yeah, let's say the next 8 months, we know for sure there's a lot of good music coming out.
Yeah, you mentioned the Classic Goa tracks, which is kind of like a subsidiary label to Suntrip. Can you call it that? And it's a digital-only label that releases like classic albums, compilations from older artists, and releases from the 90s, basically. How did that idea come, and how did you start with that?
That idea started in my car when I was driving, and I wanted to put on a CD, but the CD player didn't work. And I was kind of frustrated. I was like, let's check it where I can listen to it digitally. And of course, it wasn't available on YouTube unless with all the advertisements in between. So I was like, okay, we need a place where we can find all the classic releases. It was just in the car, like, okay, I'm sick of this. And because we were in touch with quite a lot of 90s artists already, we could start with it like it's now 4 years ago. And the focus was not only to re-release, let's say, big classics, but also unknown artists or good music from the 90s that was never got the attention it deserved. And so it was kind of successful, because within 6 months, there were 2 or 3 other labels copying the idea. I think everybody knows who I mean, but it's their right. I'm never in a fight with anyone. The more music is released, the better. But yeah, in the meantime, I think 30-40% of the music of the 90s is available again on all kind of digital platforms. So I'm really happy about this. And we still have like 20 releases coming up. So yeah, for the next year, we have enough music. And I never expected to reach 100 releases on Classic Goa tracks. But yeah, new music keeps showing up, artists keep showing up. And if we can re-release it, we will do it. I don't believe in the idea of keeping music private and only for you. I think it should be shared for the world. And if you want to pay for it, you can buy it on Bandcamp. If you don't, you can listen to it on Spotify. That's it. So like this, the new generation can hear the roots, and with the whole 90s wave, they can maybe discover music they can play on parties, and they will surprise the public.
I am really grateful for it, because now I finally don't need to grab the vinyls and the CDs anymore, because it's there on Apple Music and Spotify, as you mentioned. And by the way, you just released the Travel in Time by Nada today, right?
Very right. I think you saw it live while we are recording this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nada, who is an Israeli artist that was in the 90s kind of an underground name with, good connections, because he released music with Harold Krushki and other guys. But somehow he never made an album. It's kind of a pity, because we got quite a lot of good unreleased music of him, which was also released on the Classic Goa Tracks double CD on Suntrip at the Travel in Time track. But yeah, there was much more, as you can see, and we chose the 10 best and we released it. And maybe we will even make a vinyl of it on the longer term because, yeah, it's really good music and we think it deserves to get more attention. And it's sometimes weird that a lot of bad music from the 90s is released and a lot of very good music was stayed unreleased. Yeah, it's the way it is. It depends on labels and situations and friends that got fights. Sometimes they had a fight and they didn't want to release it anymore. And there's a lot of stories in this scene.
And so it's interesting that even with the classic Goa tracks, you are like selecting tracks. Sometimes you release old tracks that were made in the 90s but never got released, even digitally or in any other form as an album, as a digital album in this case. But what about the arrangement with artists in this case? So sometimes you release the exact same thing that was released on CD back in the 90s. How is that arranged? And you mentioned Bandcamp already, that this is a better deal usually for the artists, right?
Well, yes. How is the deal? Mostly, we give mostly 60% of the income to the artist, which is, for many of the artists, it's a big surprise because some of the artists, their music was basically stolen because the contracts were long due in let's say, 2005. The contracts were over, but all their music was online, on Spotify, on Apple Music, everywhere. And they saw it and they were like, but what can we do? Because if you mail to the support of Spotify, they will say, ask the person to remove the music. But of course, the labels don't react. So basically, it was kind of a big scam. And the artists were really happy that there was a label saying like, okay, we want to do it. We release the music and we give you 60% of the income. And in the beginning, they were a bit skeptical, like always. But this is a big job for Chris because with 20 CDs, it's easy to make an accountancy, but with 100, counting everything, it's a big job. But we still believe the artists should get this money. It's their music, it's their property, because the whole online music scene is one big mess. They were always basically fucked by a lot of labels, and we basically wanted to redo this in a fair way so everybody knows if we buy on classic Goa tracks, the money goes to the artists. And it's not a lot of money. I mean, most artists can just have a restaurant dinner with their wife once every 6 months or something. It's something like that. But hey, it's still something. And for them, it's more like about honesty and respect, because it's not really respectful to see big labels just uploading all the music that is not theirs anymore. But there's nothing you can do about it. That's the sad part.
What was your first big festival that you actually went on, like maybe psytrance or maybe a different genre, something that really inspired you, that wow, this is great, I want to go to festivals like this in the future,
and I want to organize a festival like this?
My first big festival was Solips 99, which became Ozora later on. But this was the first time I went abroad to a festival, and it was mind-blowing. It was superb. Not a bad word about it. It was a life-changing experience. And also Samotraki 2002, which was, the same. I mean, those two, they changed my life forever. That's basically it. And the idea of making a festival, it came... we did a Fractal Gate Festival in 2011, and it grew out of the smaller parties. But even then, we never really thought about doing big international festivals or anything like that. This only came, let's say, last 5 years, basically.
7 years already, 2007. We were playing with the idea.
But it's a big risk, eh? The amounts of money we're talking about. I mean, like we said, we're not professionals. We pay all this from the money from work. And if you buy a house and all this, there's not much money left. So I remember I was always a bit hesitant. Not like I don't dare to do it, but it's a tricky thing. And that's why we started quite small on the first Apsara. If you think about it, 600 people showed up. It's not a big festival, huh? Within the Goa scene, it's a bit of a legendary festival, but it was super small. And actually, I'm glad we started like this and we didn't really plan to make big international festivals from the beginning. It grew naturally, basically.
Did ZNA and the other festival, I forgot, Connection Festival, affect you guys?
Yes. I think Connection, the festival itself, it was together with ZNA. And at that time, it was bigger than ZNA. It's the first time that a festival managed to bring 2,000-3,000 people together, listening to Goa trance only for 2 decades. So it opened our eyes to see like, okay, there's clearly a public for all this, and we need festivals again because nobody else dared to take that leap before. ZNA did, but also if you looked at their very first festival, it was small and not very internationally focused. So yeah, it took a time, but for sure we were influenced by them.
And for you, Chris, what was the really definitive festival experience that influenced you?
All the ones where I was disappointed, to be honest. As I explained, I was listening to the music from 98 and that was fantastic music, but only in 2002, 3, 4, I found a few good parties which resembled that music. And then 2005, I went to Full Moon, which had, if you were lucky, 2 good tracks a day. Sometimes a set, Talamasca was good there, a few others, but very rarely. And I was like, no, this must change. And we first did these on parties in Belgium that time, and then later on the dream was to have a festival, and that was first Fractal Gate, but for Belgium just very difficult to do. So we wanted to do something at least that resembled a festival, 5 days, 24 hours, and like this the dream came to do this. And when Jos said, I think I have some good partners for this in Romania, for me this was a natural thing to do because that's what I like to do, organize parties and festivals. It was the biggest adventure of my lifetime to go into Romania, later on into Hungary, but especially the beginning of Romania was extremely difficult to set up a company there, start a festival, learn everything from scratch the hard way. I have a lot of difficulties to set it up, but probably for me, the most beautiful journey that I've experienced through all those years in working with Suntrip and organizing festivals, because you learn a lot from it and you evolve then. And if you see how we started from a 500 people festival to then in last year 1,200 people in Hungary, absolutely very proud on that project, and I could never have dreamed it to materialize like that.
Yeah, that was indeed a magical event. I was glad to be a part of it. So yeah, it was really great. And especially that it was happening here close by in Hungary. And it's interesting to see the connection between different festivals, like you mentioned ZNA. So you guys originally had this concept for Apsara that it will be on the other years, so not to compete with ZNA and have like a totally different vision, or what was the original concept for that?
Absolutely. First of all, we loved ZNA very much, so why compete with them? We want more, not less. So we wanted to go for the other years, as we have been for many, many years every year at ZNA. And that's not possible if you organize a festival the same summer. Then two, CNA is a fantastic festival with its own concept. In the place it is, nearly unbeatable. Such a beautiful place, 5,000 people, massive energy. But we had our own vision where we wanted also, where CNA has this old school vision where they do the best of the old school in a bigger variety than we do, with some early progressive. For example, in the late afternoons, and they have then a modern after party. We wanted the mixed thing, just what we like, modern and old school in between, but very focused in our case on a daytime and a nighttime concept. Sometimes even then a little experimenting towards the Suomi, which is different from CNA. And we want for sure to keep ours a little bit smaller to fit a place in Hungary that we love so much under the trees, and because it's not possible to do it with our daytime jobs, to do it even bigger. Like this, it's a totally different concept than ZNA, in my opinion, and that's what the scene needs, not more of the copycat of a festival. Each festival needs its own identity. And that's also why I supported Surya as well with Jos, because I think that has a totally concept of its own, with the daytime only, very focused on the sober things. And that's the only thing to succeed in a festival, if you have your own identity. And we are clearly different as ZNA, yet we have the same goal: promote as much good Goa trance as possible.
Where does the name Apsara come from? I know it's the first compilation, but
we found it very fit as the first compilation from Suntrip as a name. And then the compilation already has the dancing nymph, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. It's the dancing nymphs in, here we go again, Sanskrit mythology. They were like when the music was playing, the nymphs started to dance.
So it's a bit symbolic for us to name it like this. It also gave it a Suntrip connection easily, and we love the name. So.
And what were your greatest memories of the first edition in Romania, the first edition of Apsara? How successful do you think, from an organizer perspective, that event was?
Let's start shortly with a positive thing. It was, of course, the happening we hoped it would be. We would have hoped it would be a little bit bigger. But from an atmosphere point of view, from the crowd, the energy they brought, even in our most difficult times, and we had many in that festival, it's your first festival abroad. It's nearly impossible to do it perfectly. But even in the most difficult, problematic moments in the logistics and setting up the festival in the office, we hear the crowd shout so much that it just gave us energy to continue with all the difficult tasks. We all slept so little hours at that festival, yet the people and the energy from the crowd and what we saw materializing on that dance floor kept us alive. So the positive thing was, it was probably the best start you can have. Not small enough to not have a good vibe, but small enough to have probably the best private festival with 500 people and 100 guests and artists that you can imagine with such a lineup. And for me, the beauty was everything that we learned and the outcome together, because setting up the company was a huge hazard in Romania, very difficult. Finding the location right before the festival and seeing a road that is destroyed and having to manage all of that, having a breakdown on the showers, you name it, the generator one night, having to move a generator from the chill out to the main floor. You all learn from that and you build from it. But in the end, it was the energy from the crowd that made the project successful, because there was a loss. That lost even more when the COVID came for the second edition. Then basically it could have been the end, if not that our loyal crowd that came to our parties for a long time didn't ask everything back to us, and they donated a lot to us, which we will forever be grateful for, because honestly it made us sitting from a huge loss to a normal possible loss to handle as a normal working person. Like this, after a long time, which was convincing me, we managed to continue in Hungary, which has way less hassles, as it's more Europe for me than, especially accountancy, than Romania. International airport close by, there's so many advantages, and under the trees on the location of Sun Festival, the Csabanka Puszta is such a beautiful place that basically everything they came together, while in Romania we were an open field. Nice location, but too difficult. This one has everything. You feel, if you drive in Csabanka Puszta, you're out of this world after a while, yet it is accessible from Budapest, not too far. People are way easier to work with than in Romania. Everything, the government especially, so everything has to fall together for a fest. And the beautiful thing was, we learned so many things from the first one that we could do the second one already a lot better. And then there's new things to learn, of course, on every festival. And that's a journey on its own, which I appreciate a lot, because it made me who I am today, and it has given me fantastic experiences.
Yes, from my side, the first Apsara, I think for the people on the dance floor, it was one of the best festivals of last decade, without any doubt, because even though there were only 604 paying people, yes, 604, exactly, the dance floor never emptied. At 6 in the morning, there were people. At 9 in the evening, it never stopped. And there were even people putting their hammocks on the dance floor. So it was interesting to see. It was like the freaks of the freaks. Only the hardcore freaks went there, and it gave a very special atmosphere because the people there knew about the music. They cared about storytelling in the DJ sets and all this, and it was the best crowd you can imagine. And because it was really a nature location. It was a bit like a rave. You had you can sleep in the forest wherever you wanted. There were no securities kicking your ass. There were no fences saying where to go or not. It was basically behave and rave. I think, that's where it's all about in our scene. Of course, the bigger you go, it's not possible like that anymore, but I'm still glad we did it because from a organizer point of view, like Chris already mentioned, we had to learn a lot from that, which is, a logical evolution. But I think last Apsara was much more professional already, and we'll make sure the next one will be even better. Although musical-wise, we're already top-notch. But there's much more on a festival to do than that, I think.
For those listeners who never organized a festival, nor even a party, can you tell us what are the tasks besides bringing the artist and the music?
You have so many different tasks, but to name them a few core tasks from a festival legal point of view, which is a very important one and the most boring one, but making sure you have a effective working company that is paying its VAT once again, that is operating everywhere within the law, has the license to sell drinks or not, use external partners where necessary. Your legal setup, you have your accountancy in that included, but then you have your artist management where you need to go from booking a hotels or renting a full hotel in our case for 10 days, booking all the flights, which we all do ourselves, usually me and Jos. Then having for your artists drivers, which you better use an external driver for unless you want to contact 100 taxis independently. So a lot of organizing comes also around working effectively and finding the right partners in a festival and making sure they deliver and they get all their info correctly. Making sure you can pay the artists in a legal way and making sure the artists know what to expect. Then building your festival lineup so that you really have the perfect music on the perfect time, which Jos is a master in because his DJ experience, his knowledge. He will usually make our timetables, which is a lot of work too, because you cannot just book a bunch of artists and then hope they will fit together and your nights and days will be filled correctly. So that's some planning to do. Then hiring security, having first aid, which is obviously a very important one because in our scene, although 99.9% comes with the right intentions. You might have 0.5% idiots. The bigger you go, the more idiots appear. That's how it is in life, too badly. So you need to have security for that. Then to take care of your guests on a festival, you need to have proper first aid in case anything goes wrong. All the logistics need to be integrated into that together with a plan to present to the government how you're going to handle all of this, which is a big task on its own as well. And then in the end, when organizing the festival, you also need to be sure you have a full team together that takes care of this, in which Peter comes in as well here, because with the Apsara for 2025 that we are planning now, he's our partner for Apsara 2025 to organize. So we will have to do a lot of meetings in Hungary to be able to, first of all, work together with all of them in a Hungarian way, but me and Jos speaking then everything through in English, if possible, making sure that all those chains are 100% connected is probably the biggest tasks of them all as an organizer. And therefore you then need a few people underneath you who can really manage tasks because as said, in the beginning, we didn't sleep much, but this is not possible to continue in the long run. So you need a full team underneath you, which is basically what we are building nowadays with a new Apsara to be able to make sure that we can continue in the long run and that the festival is better organized and not depending from 3 people who have no sleep after 5 days and are totally destroyed. But as said, we started small and we saved on everything to be able to survive. Now that the festival was sold out this year, we are building more and more on a better team and better logistics, a bigger bar, more bars, more food shops. And these are the lessons we learned from the second Apsara. And like this, you continue to upgrade your organization, and that's the most difficult one, to find good partners and good people underneath you to be able to run the whole concept, because every chain is as weak as a single component, of course. So, and then there comes in all the volunteers, which is another task, the volunteer working, which is another talent you need to have on your own to be able to work with so many people together and make sure they all do their tasks. But it comes from two ways. The volunteer needs to be motivated, and you as a festival organizer need to properly inform them, treat them well, having cooks to have food for them all 3 times per day. So it's a huge logistical situation in the end. Festival, you only get experience with doing it, and then you get slowly better into integrating this and building your team.
Yes, exactly. And it's incredible how many little tasks are in there, like the water pressure to make sure all the showers have enough water at the moment. Everybody's taking a shower at the same time. Taxi drivers, when artists are arriving, who is taking care of them in the airport. It's people underestimate the amount of logistics on a international festival, but it's huge. But yeah, I mean, the more experience we get, the better it will go, I guess.
And in terms of the lineup, I think what made Apsara unique to me the last year when I experienced it was that, as Chris also said, it was really a musical journey from start to finish, and the way the artists were put in a lineup were really, it was really a concept and a stable flow throughout the whole event. How much do you try? What are the ratios for live sets and DJ performances do you normally calculate with, or is there like any kind of golden rule for a good festival lineup for you?
It's interesting what you say, because I never even thought how many % of them is live, how many % of them is a DJ. Because, yeah, what we usually do is take a certain amount, let's say big names or names that have a clear attraction to the crowds, and you start to build around them, because a lot of artists have great music but are not really known. And as a DJ, of course, I'm nonstop busy with discovering the unknown guys and all this. So I try to make a mix of both. But I also think a DJ has a very important spot on a festival. And these days you see it on it's not really criticism to us or whatever big festival or Universal Parallel or Boom, but 80 or 90% of gigs are live sets, which means it's almost impossible to make a real story, because, you know, as a DJ, you can really go to a live act. I mean, build your music towards a live act, while a live act cannot really build his music towards the next live act, because, yeah, it can be anyone at any moment. I think compared to them, we have quite a lot of DJs, which is just because I think a good DJ set is probably, and that's maybe a personal thing, but they managed to get me higher than a good live set mostly, because they could surprise. While a live set, you mostly know more or less what to expect. Good DJ, he managed to bring you to other realms. That's why I will focus on the DJs too. But also here, there's a lot of DJs in the world, and only quite limited amount is really good, I think, in my opinion. Many of them still need to grow, but yeah, this is a paradox a bit, because they need to play a lot to grow. But of course, if there's no parties in their country, they cannot play. And so this is the only reason why the scene should grow and grow and grow. So everybody benefits of it. And I can only hope, if we do parties like Apsara, that people are positively influenced and say, yeah, we'll do small parties in my place too, at home. And yeah. But yeah, pure musical speaking, the lineup, it's a big task, but it was never really a hard task. It's a lot of work, but we were never like, oh no, who we have to book. It's always like, okay, we have so many names. Let's see what fits with what. And yeah, me and Chris, we never had any fights about this. The flow was always naturally. So
which are your dream artists or DJs that have not yet appeared and you want them to be there once?
Okay, for live sets, for me, Silent Buddy, which is his CD is incredibly good, I think, and there's still a lot of unreleased music out there that is super good. we tried. So the guy replied, I have a normal life with 3 kids now. So basically that was a no. I will try again and again and again until he says, yeah, I will come, stop nagging. And exploring inner space, which is one of my favorite acid trance artists of the 90s, who never played. I would normally have said Doof, but yeah, as they're playing on ZNA now, we can already remove that one from the list. As a DJ, actually, I wouldn't really know. The best DJ sets were the ones I didn't really expecting anything, and they blew me away. And it happened on small parties in faraway countries sometimes. So yeah, those two. Honestly, if I have to say 2 names, those 2.
Many of the names that we had once as dream list all materialized. There's a few that I still would love to see. It's usually or difficult to do, or it's impossible because they died. From what's possible, I would say I still dream to once book Hallucinogen Spungle on my events, simply because he had such a huge impact on me discovering the music and because it's one of the most genius of them all. And sometimes to see, probably not like the dream artist, but I would like to see old artists going more live with tweaking the music wherever possible. For example, then a real Greeners of the Revolution set thrills me more with the 3 of them than when I see one guy performing it. Or what we once experienced as utter magic, not possible anymore nearly either, maybe, but Dimension 5, with 3 or 4 of the guys even in the beginning of the set. These are more the dreams that I then have personally, because I know if you really make it live, and it doesn't matter to me if you do that in the studio, changing the music or doing it live on stage, as long as the music is really giving the listener a completely different experience than what he has listened to on a CD, can really bring people in a higher state, just like a DJ set can do that. But for a live set, it's sometimes difficult to raise above that level. You can do it with good storytelling, but that's sometimes difficult for live sets as they are not DJs. Some can do it, or with changing the track slightly, so it becomes a really fantastic experience for those who know that music already.
Yes, and I have a third name, Bodgaya. Not sure if you ever heard of them, but they are really great tribal trance from Germany, but very unique. If you never heard it, check the album Ayahuasca on High Society Records. It's very good.
So how do you see the future of the Goa trance scene? What are your expectations for the Goa trance festivals? Also, we can maybe talk about we don't need to go into the specific, but we all heard that the Daksha had to be cancelled this year because of poor ticket sales, but ZNA seems to be strong, or at least they are happening with a great lineup. So what are your expectations for the scene for the future?
I will let Chris answer about the parties. I will take the musical part. Let's do it like this.
Okay.
Chris, it's okay, yeah? Musical-wise, I think, honestly, we need more new artists, because artists like, we mentioned my no name, Green Ants and all this, in 10 or 20 years, they're old men, and I mean old men. So forget about playing live anymore. So I think it's very important to have new guys standing up and keeping the scene alive. Yeah, we have one label as Suntrip trying to help to promote some new names. But as said, I hope a lot of new guys stand up and start new labels. I think it's kind of important to have the new generation jump in. But yeah, as you cannot predict the future, I'm not sure if it's going to happen, because I have the feeling last 20 years, the scene had quite a major crash, like you said, after COVID. Also within Goa Trance, the producers, there's less and less releases, which is kind of a problem, I think. I don't know how to do it. If I could change one thing in the scene, it's to have more releases. It's, yeah. Also for new young guys, imagine you're making music. Let's say we don't release it, and they're like, yeah, but there's no choice to be on a CD unless Global Sector or Suntrip. And if they're not chosen, they just leave the scene, because they were never motivated. While if there are small labels, they can grow and grow and grow, and in the end they will reach the goal. But it's hard if you never get motivated by some other label. You just fade away. So I think this is the musical parts. We should really invest in new artists and promote them and let them play and put the names online. And I was even thinking in the past about platforms where you can hear all the new guys. But yeah, it's very hard to, it's time, it takes a lot of time and I don't have it. That's basically it. But I hope new guys stand up. I was once young and full of motivation, so I'm sure there must be new guys like this too. And Chris, the parties, you can go ahead because you can say a lot about it. Sure.
The parties and the festivals, I think that is something that, like I said, first of all, goes always into waves. So that depends on a local scene per scene, honestly, because if I saw how Belgium sometimes went opposite with the international trend, like I said, when we came up extremely strong again with our Goa Trance parties, at a certain point reaching more than 1,000 people on a pure Goa Trance stage in Belgium, then going back to 300-400, but then recently suddenly having another party with 700 people. So that really goes into waves over long years. But festival-wise, I think Goa Trance is doing strong. If I see that, like I said, Boom has some 2 days at least with very strong names, both some new and some old, which were the first to do it basically, and also to promote Jaws back then. And then CNA came up very hard and became bigger than I personally ever expected. Like Josh said, they came from very far, they invested a lot in it, and it became very slowly bigger and bigger. But now it attracts 5,000 people, and sold out, fantastic job. Massive lineup, dream. Then we see Ozora with for a Goa Trance lover. You could not imagine this 8 to 10 years ago, 24-hour strong Goa Trance lineup to begin with, but more important, every day, a little bit. Solitar on the Dome, Hiroko, a few others, sometimes even yourself, Peter. Not always the most famous names, but a nice mix, because very famous names and DJs, upcoming talents, so they rotated a bit around the stages, but in the end there is a massive amount of Goa Trance on Ozora, which is fantastic to see. Then we have been lucky with Apsara, with our festival, to grow it, and we want to keep it more or less where it is, to grow to 1,400, 1,500 people, so only a tiny growth, but that's perfect for us. Then Daksha, I think they had some bad luck with communicating too late and having it during Ozora and all the circumstances. But if they have a well-managed plan to grow slowly in the next years, then it can become another festival. But then let's not forget, and that's like Ozora, very important. You have Shankra in Switzerland that also promotes for years, at least 5 to 10 names in the Goa Trance atmosphere or musical part. You have even many classical names nowadays on Foo, so slowly also some influence comes there, because obviously if you compare this to 10 years ago, the scene is going strong, and I think that is what we need to remember. And if I see how Ozora now more and more, I'm sure that will have an effect on other festivals as well. So then I personally see that actually going strong, see the Israeli scene massively active after the tragical happenings that happened to them on the 7th of October. Was also actually a surprise, because I thought it would have maybe killed or destroyed a big part of that scene that always has been very important in the Goa Trance scene. But after, of course, their griefs and sadness, they came back very strong, and the artists played more than ever before. Before as well, with Ozora, Apsara, Lunar 604 parties there. Macedonia tries to do some more Suntrip events. So personally, I'm seeing that actually very positive. And I think as long as we can keep a real mixture of upcoming talents, which is very important, like Jos said, both DJs and especially also live acts, and the old guys coming more back like Xenomorphs did, and maybe Ethnica can also achieve this again. So I think personally the future looks bright, and we could not even imagine this 10 years ago. So for me personally, I don't see anything negative for now. We just have to try to mitigate the difficulties of this world, because that's the difficult thing for people. On the one hand, everyone wants to escape on a festival for a week out of this crazy world, which is an important thing, to disconnect from all the social media on such a festival and have fun. But on the other hand, it becomes also challenging to organize them because of geopolitical stuff happening, because of inflation. So I think that is the major difficulties that festivals will face in the coming years, to contain your prices. And for that, thank God that we both have good jobs so that we are least dependent on that, because if I need to live from a festival, I would be more worried personally than I am nowadays.
And that was our interview with Suntrip. We hope you have learned some inside secrets of running a label and organizing a festival. Our next episode will be live recording from Ozora.
Thanks for listening, people. If you enjoy our podcast, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe. If you have any ideas, questions, leave a comment or message us on Facebook.